Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. It's been a minute. So I'm going to do something a little bit different today. I'm actually going to review two shows at the same time. And it's primarily because one of these shows just recently closed on Broadway. And as far as I know, there's no talk of it going on tour, at least not as at the time of recording this. So I didn't think I should make it its own video. I figured, well, if you've seen it, great. If not, my video won't change your mind. So I'm going to review two shows. First up is Once Upon a One More Time. We sneaked this in almost not last minute, but if you're not interested in my thoughts on this show because there's no way for you to view it if you haven't yet, I will put a time code here to move on to the second show. All right, so Once Upon a One More Time. It was in previews in May, officially opened in June, and it closed Labor Day weekend, all in the same year. So it didn't run very long. Never had great capacity numbers, never had great box office numbers. But since we were trying to make up from all this COVID and we're seeing all these shows, as I've been talking about on this channel, as a family, we kind of vote on what we want to see. And my husband and daughter especially wanted to see this. It's not that I didn't want to see it, but I know they wanted it more. Liked the premise, so we went. So I'm going to give a very quick recap and then just my overall thoughts. And then there's some extra thoughts since this is the first show I'm talking about this channel that I saw it just in time and then it closed. Everything else that I've seen was either on tour or hasn't closed yet. So, okay. Once Upon One More Time is a sort of a jukebox musical. It features the music from Britney Spears. And what it basically does is it takes all the classic fairy tales that we're all familiar with and tries to bend them on their ear and make them all feminist and have like an awakening. And so the princesses try to change the situation. And that might sound familiar. So I have a theory about why the show didn't connect with audiences or why didn't it find an audience in time. But we'll get to that. So that's just like the basic plot line. I am going to go ahead and spoil this thing in case it never sees the light of day again. I do know that this is even though it's a brand new show, I know it's been workshopped a lot, and I believe it had a run in DC for a time. I don't know if that was pre-COVID. Again, I don't know how long we can blame COVID on the outcome of things. Obviously, the further we get away from 2020, the less that's going to matter to anything that's happening now. But I want to skip to my overall thoughts. It's fun. We had a good time. Is it a great show? I wouldn't say that, but I don't need shows to be like all inspiring or super cerebral or, there's nothing wrong with fluff. Sometimes you need fluff. Sometimes your life is so full of deep thoughts and, you have to figure your life out. Not every form of entertainment needs to be that way. So I had fun. I didn't love it. So if I just didn't get the tickets in time, if we had just missed it, or if we had bought tickets but they had closed it prior to when we were gonna go, now that I know what I know, it would have been okay if I missed it. If I'm being completely honest, just how I feel. But I'll tell you why. So basically, to me, this show it was like a glorified Britney Spears concert with a fairy tale princess overlay, if that makes sense. It just didn't feel like it was done. It felt like a rough draft show. So I don't know. I've heard people. This has a lot of fans. If you're a fan of the show, I am not trying to insult you. You are allowed to love this because this is not a bad thing to be a fan of. Um, but I have heard rumblings of people saying, "Oh, it shouldn't have jumped to Broadway this soon. It should have been off Broadway, or maybe it should have gone to a smaller theater because the capacity for this show has been bad." I mean, the week before they announced that they were closing, it only sold to 47% capacity. I mean, that's terrible. That's pretty bad. Um, but I understand why. It feels a little lazy. It doesn't feel very fresh or inspiring. And what I mean by that is, I think it's hard for a show trying to be like an it show, trying to be like, oh, look, we're so with it. It's almost like parents who are trying to use young people's vernacular to sound cool, but they all they do is sound old. um, I don't know who made this show. I don't know who they made it for. As I was watching, I was trying to figure out who the audience was. Now, my daughter loved this show. She was rocking out to it and having a great time. And I never thought that I would have a kid who'd be into Britney Spears music because Britney Spears is from my era. I was a teenager when Britney became this huge thing. So I was fully prepared for my children to look at my music and be like, oh, your music's so old. And that's fine. I don't know how involved Brittany was with this, if at all. I don't know if someone just approached her with this concept and just got her permission and that's it, or if she was like an executive producer, or if she wanted this to happen, but she hired a team because she's not a musical theater person, like, oh, I want this to happen, but I'm going to hire people who know what they're doing and let them do it. So I don't know Brittany's involvement. I meant to look it up. Um, yeah. So it but it just felt so lazy. Like it was all like, we're feminists, woo! But then it kind of didn't do anything with that. Like they kept saying, we're going to make this big change. And they tried and they wanted to. And maybe the point was to show that just because you want something to happen, you want something to change, doesn't mean it can change overnight. And we have to be okay with making the changes slowly. I don't know. I was very confused about what it was actually trying to say because it presented itself as it's going to be this, strong post Me Too, look at us being all empowered kind of thing. But it was just so soft. And it fell into certain tropes that seem to happen with this kind of media where they're like, oh, look at us, we're so woke. We're so feminist. Feminism, especially because that's the one thing I have followed my whole life. I haven't followed all these other topics that are newer because they don't pertain to me. But I am a woman, so I have been following, female history and our rights and all this stuff. There's certain things they did, like so. For instance, Justin, oh, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Garari. He was actually the runner up on American Idol the first season that show ever aired, and yes, I totally watched it. Lost to Kelly Clarkson, so that's how Kelly Clarkson became Kelly Clarkson. But he was the runner up. He plays Prince Charming. He's very charming in this. Like he fit what this role was. Now there could have been more to it. I don't know if his acting was limited or if there just wasn't a whole lot to work with. I can't tell the difference between those two layers. I didn't study that part of theater, so I don't want to pretend to be an expert because I'm not. Um, but they gave him the "Oops, I Did It Again" as a song, and that's such a crowd pleaser, and he did such a good job. And I'm like, okay, for a show that's supposed to be about women, why are we giving some of the really good songs to the men in this show? Well, not men. He's really there's a narrator who's a man, but they're the only male characters of any consequence. But they gave him a lot of really like big cheering moments. And the other thing about the songs is they didn't sing any of them all the way through. The first couple songs, they changed the lyrics to fit this show. So instead of singing "Hit Me Baby One More Time," they actually do say "Once Upon a One More Time," which is not how the actual song goes. So they kept tweaking it so that it's close to the song we all know if you're a Britney Spears expert or fan of any kind. But they tweaked enough of the words so that they fit the narrative. But as we got deeper into the show, they did that less. So in Act Two, and this was released on social media, so you can easily go view this if you haven't seen the show. There's a character who plays like the evil stepmother, and she sings "Toxic." And I don't think they changed any of the words at all to that song. And she's singing it to the narrator, and the lyrics in that song didn't make sense for what was the scene going on. This is the problem with jukebox musicals. I love jukebox musicals, but sometimes I think the reason they fail is they're trying to fit these square pegs into round holes. Like, oh, here's what the song is about, but how do we make the show fit it so this is the song they would sing if it was written for this show? You know what I mean? Now, like Mamma Mia is really guilty of that, but I don't care. I think that's just a good time. This is similar to that, but I don't think it does it as well. And the other striking thing is as the show unfolded, I couldn't help but think to myself, oh my God, this is just like Barbie. But Barbie did it better. If you haven't seen Barbie yet, and I don't know who hasn't because it's made over $1 billion. If you didn't get to see Once Upon a One More Time, but you did see Barbie, then you got to see basically the same story, but Barbie did it better, and it even had musical numbers in it. Um, it's weird. Like you have this quintessential character. So in the movie Barbie, it's stereotypical Barbie. In Once Upon a One More Time, it's Cinderella. Of course, I don't understand the obsession with Cinderella lately. Rodgers and Hammerstein made a perfectly adequate Cinderella musical decades ago. So we've had our Cinderella musical for decades. And then just in this year, Andrew Lloyd Webber had to bring to our attention, I know it's not new this year, but it was new to Broadway, Bad Cinderella, which also closed after a couple months. And then this, which heavily features the princesses, but it spotlights hardcore Cinderella. I think Broadway needs a moratorium on all things Cinderella. Her story's been done. She's been done to death. It's time to put that glass slipper back in the box or wherever you put glass slippers. Like too much Cinderella. Maybe that's a hang up. Maybe it's a curse for Broadway shows. Don't do vampires and don't do Cinderella. Your show will close a little too early. But Cinderella is the character who is going through her fairy tale over and over again, and she has this little awakening moment of like, but I want more. I think there's more. Isn't there more? And so she's doing this self-discovery thing, and she goes to she's visited by her fairy godmother, of course, who is kind of telling her how the real world works, kind of like how Weird Barbie tells stereotypical Barbie about how the world, they send about both are sent on a quest, and they have to fight the patriarchy. um and both Cinderella and Barbie have to go back to either the other Barbies or the other princesses and de-brainwash them, so that they can fight back too. And things are resolved a little too easily. So I didn't get a sense of stakes because the problem got resolved fairly quickly. So I was like, oh well, that was easy. Now in this show, Cinderella does have her best friend out of the group is Snow White, and she was very good. I should do. That's right. Shame on me. I did not do shout outs. Cinderella is played by Briga Helene. Where's Snow White? Snow White. My lining this up right. Was played by Asia Jackson. Oh my God, she was so good. She was so good. I mean, they all were good. The funny thing is the advertising for this show was weird too. Outside the theater, they have giant windows, and they had character posters. So you saw a giant one for Cinderella, a giant one for Snow White, a giant one for the Little Mermaid, and she doesn't have a name. She's just the Little Mermaid. A giant one for Sleeping Beauty, also no name. She's just Sleeping Beauty. The Princess and the Pea, Rapunzel. And so I thought this was going to be like an ensemble piece, and we'd follow all of them and they would each have a different kind of awakening. No, it's very much a Cinderella story, but Snow White's drafting her. So they're the only two that really get personalities and arcs. Snow White's done very, very well. But what kept me from falling in love with them all the way, and again, this is a writing thing, um, part of what keeps these princesses in line is that they have to be stupid. Like they don't know how to read and they don't know how things work and they're just so ditzy. Um, but there's also moments where Cinderella is not stupid, because she's always correcting everyone's spelling. I'm like, well, if you can't read, how do you know how that's spelled correctly? So there's like continuity problems. Um, yeah, I'm like, did they have to be so dumb? So I just couldn't get over the one-dimensional character. I can't even say that there was character development. I don't know if anyone really develops in this. And the framing device for this show is confusing. So it opens up with the narrator greeting a little girl and he's giving her a book, like, oh, what fairy tale do you want to read tonight? And she goes, Cinderella. And so he calls Cinderella and he reads her story. And then the book closes and the little girl has gone to bed, but were in the book. And so when they're not being read, they kind of just have their own little life. And so Cinderella has she calls it a scroll club. So it's just their version of book club. And so all the princesses get together and they just read their own fairy tales because all they know is their own stories. So what gets the plot going is Cinderella right out of the gate is all like, I'm not satisfied. I feel like there should be more to my life. Is this what happily ever after is? And so the fairy godmother hears her and she drops the feminine mystique in her lap and she reads it and it gets her all, she has her awakening. And then she shares it with the other princesses and they have their awakening. So they disrupt the fairy tale world. But as they go forward in the plot, it's very blurry about what's happening because the fairy godmother apparently was banished to Story's End, is like so the narrator is like God and he's trying to control everyone. And later in the show, when Cinderella's at her lowest, the little girl comes and talks to her, and I'm like, how are they talking? I don't know. It's all hickly pickly, and it's not like you can't do crazy supernatural fantasy stuff. It's just they didn't really establish the rules, so I didn't understand how things were happening the way they were happening. It was just too simplified, and they didn't bother to explain it. Not that I have to have my hand held throughout the whole thing, but I was just confused about where are the stakes. Do they only exist when the girl is reading the book? They don't seem to because they have a life outside of it. What happens when she stops reading the book? Are they in their own, is their book their universe? Are there other books that have other versions of the characters and they're living their own, kind of like the Marvel Cinematic, like, are they variants? If that's a reference that means anything to you. Because I know growing up, I had lots of books that had the same stories in them, but they weren't told exactly the same way. So I'm like, okay, could there be other books and there's different versions of these princesses based on who wrote the book? So many questions. I'm probably diving way too deep. I don't think the show is trying to be deep on that level at all. But yeah, it felt very flat, story wise and character wise, and I just need characters that feel like they grow and change and do something. But if you just want to go and listen to some Britney Spears music, kind of, because they don't play the whole song and they change the words, it's a good time. So, fun thing, as we entered the theater, they were passing out these wristbands that you could wear. And it had that little plastic tab that you pull, and they're like, make sure you pull the tab. And we were like, oh, okay. So I pulled the tab and I put it on and I forgot all about it. Well, since it's so common now for Broadway shows to not just have a bow, but they kind of do like an encore song. Well, when that happened, all these got activated, and so they started flashing colors, and everyone was up on their feet dancing and singing along to Britney Spears music, and it suddenly turned into like a rave party. So it was fun. I mean, my daughter, who's afraid of noise, I never pictured her going to like a concert of any kind. She was like jumping and hollering, and I'm like, oh, I think if the music is the right music, she could have a good time. So this is a fun little treat that other shows aren't doing this that I know about. Um, I find it hard to see that they weren't making the money that they should have been making, but they had money for the maybe cut some things back. This is a luxury you don't have to have. Um, it's not like it saves the show. It's a fun little tidbit. I'm glad we had it, but it doesn't work anymore. I was gonna demonstrate it for you, but I like push the button and nothing happens. It played later that day and the next day, but it doesn't do anything now. Okay, but that's a fun little thing. Um, so what I really want to talk about, so basic plot, my overall feelings without getting into all the machinations about it. I want to talk about why this show didn't succeed, and I would love your theories if you want to put them in the comments. So I was nervous for the show when I saw the numbers as it. At first, I was like, "Oh well, it's in previews. Do shows always do well in previews?" I don't know. I've only been paying attention for about a year now, like actually looking at the business side, and I'm trying to learn the business side of Broadway. But then as the summer was rolling along, I was like, "Oh man, my family wants to see this and I kind of want to see it." I was like, we better buy tickets. And so we bought tickets in July for the Labor Day weekend, and then it was like the middle of August and it really wasn't doing well. And they announced it was closing. I was like, oh no, when? And they're like September 3rd. Our tickets were for September 2nd. I'm like, oh, we're gonna just get in there. Um, so I have some thoughts. When you read the description, or even if you listen to what I just said, it sounds an awful lot like Six and Juliet. All three of these musicals are taking iconic female characters or real people and changing the outcome. You know, it's not his story, it's her story. So it's all like feminism and it's girly and girl power and woo. So is there just not room on Broadway to have three shows that have such a similar? Now, I don't think it's identical. Now that I've seen this, I don't think it's anything like Six, really. Um, I'm definitely going to move up when we haven't seen Anne Juliet yet, but it's on the list, and I'm definitely moving it up now that I've seen this because I really, really want to see how they fare. I don't mean to compare them, but I'm like, okay, Anne Juliet and Once Upon One More Time are both jukebox musicals, and they take fictional women that are famous, princesses and Juliet. They're very famous women, but they're famous because of the man in their life. And both of these stories, as far as I know, I haven't seen Anne Juliet, but as far as I know, what they're both trying to do is say it's not about him, it's about her. And what if she had choices? What if she could do something different? What if her ending could be different? So that sounds very similar. I'm like, well, maybe there's just not room on Broadway for two shows with such a similar conceit. Now, how it's like Six is I thought, again, based on the advertising, they had all those character posters. So I was like, oh, and there's like 5 or 6 of them. I was like, maybe it'll be ensemble-esque, like how Six is not about a single queen. It really is about all 6 queens as evenly as possible. I know Anne Boleyn is like the most famous of the bunch, and everyone probably has their favorite the more they watch Six, but they really do try to make it fair. So I thought this was trying to make it fair. It really isn't. So is that why? Is there just not room? Like you can't have too many of the same thing of anything on Broadway. So maybe there just wasn't room for three. That's a possibility. I'm worried that like maybe Britney Spears is not the draw that people think she is. The nostalgia train is hitting hard to my exact age group. That they're all like, "Remember this thing from your youth? Ah, it's back now." So that's popular. And thanks to current events of her personal life with the conservatorship coming to light and the hashtag Free Britney movement, I mean, that I thought that was pretty big. So I was like, okay, this is keeping her relevant. People are aware of her. People like my daughter who otherwise probably wouldn't know who she is. So I thought she actually had a very big following where it's not crazy to think, oh, make a musical that has Britney Spears music. That should sell. That maybe on paper that sounds really good. I don't know. I don't know why this didn't connect, but maybe it follows up to what I said earlier about as I watched it, I was like, who is this for? It's a little too adult for young girls to really get what it's talking about. But I guess it could at least start a dialogue. Um, it's too simple, I think, for older women because we're sitting there going, "Yeah, we know you're not saying anything we don't already know, and you don't even have a fresh take on it." I don't know. I don't know who this show was supposed to be for, and I do feel bad that it didn't find an audience, but I can't say that it didn't have a chance. It had all summer. Summer is supposed to be a good time for Broadway, and Broadway's box office did look pretty healthy, all things considered. I know prices are going up, everything's going up, inflation sucks. Um, but other shows are not suffering. If all shows were suffering, then you could totally blame it exclusively on the pricing and whatnot. So I don't know. I don't know why this didn't connect, but if anyone watching this follows Broadway closer and has followed longer than me, I would love your thoughts on why you think it just didn't make it. I mean, maybe there is no scientific method to figure out why a show closes early versus why does it get to run a little longer. Maybe it's just the luck of the draw, I guess. But uh yeah, it was just okay. But if I had missed it, I don't think I would have been sad. Um it was fine. I mean, I have the money to go see it, and tickets were cheap and all that, but I know it looks like I'm probably made of money because of how the amount of shows I've seen just in this past year, but I'm really not. I really do need to be more selective. So this is going to start to slow down a little bit. Um, so I am going to be a little bit more picky about what I see just because I don't have that much disposable income, not really to do it at the rate that I have been. So just okay show. If it finds another life later, great. Maybe they're not done working out kinks. Maybe it'll get ironed out some more. Uh, but I'm not mad that I saw it. It was fun, just kind of simple, if that makes sense. Anyway, so that's Once Upon One More Time. Okay, so I was much more excited about this other show that we also had tickets to see. So we saw Once Upon a One More Time first, and then after that, we went and saw Shucked. I was I was so excited to see this. When I first heard about this, I was like, that looks like the most stupid thing ever. What a dumb idea for a show. But I didn't actually know what it was about. So their advertising, I think their ad campaign was very, very good. I liked all the little things they did, like offering the hay rides and um, just the ads they're putting out and all the puns. Oh my goodness. I am a sucker for puns. And, it's like, what's the show about? It's about corn. Seriously? So I was like, I don't know. I always am drawn to the dark things. Like I like Sweeney Todd and Little Shop of Horrors and Les Mis. Like I like dark, sad, Hades Town. I like all that kind of stuff. This is so not usually my wheelhouse. I don't know, but it called me, so I felt compelled to go. And its box office, I think, is on the bubble. It's been moderate. It's not amazing box office, but I don't know if they need to be afraid yet. And as of taping this review, they have not announced that they're closing. So what they make has to be sufficient. All right, so I'm gonna treat this more like a regular review because the show is still currently running. As far as I know, has not announced a tour yet. So right now it's exclusively on Broadway, and that's okay. So, Shucked. Don't you look at this? Isn't that crazy? Look at that. What a great, whoever came up with his name is a genius. What's it about? It's about corn. Oh, seriously. So the super duper back cover gist of this show is it's about a little town that's surrounded by corn, and the corn is their livelihood. They need their corn to live, and so they're all about the corn. One day the corn starts to die, and they all freak out, and one plucky girl says, hey, maybe we should leave our little town and go find help. And of course, no one else in the town thinks that's a good idea. They have trust issues. They like their wall of corn, keeping them from the outside world. I'm not quite sure where this is supposed to be located. They just say Cobb County, but they don't say where that is. And so she decides to go against everyone's advice and go get help. And she goes to the big city, Tampa. So that kind of gives me an idea, but they don't show how she gets there. I don't know if she drove there or took a plane. Well, she stumbles across a doctor who's a doctor for your corns, like on your feet, and she misconstrues that, and so she thinks he's a like corn the food expert, and she convinces him to come back to her little town with her, and he's really a shyster. So he has other intentions in mind. But of course, once you get there, this is like a Hallmark movie. Underneath, he has a heart of gold, and she brings out the best in him, and all these things happen. So it ends happy. It's a comedy, and the downside, I'm gonna try not to build it up too much in case you haven't seen this show yet. Everything I've read said, "Oh, this is the funniest show on Broadway. It's the funniest thing since Book of Mormon." Woo! all this like hyperbole. That's very dangerous to put out there because the more people say it's the funniest thing ever, you almost walk in going, "Well, prove it, make me laugh." It's not that it wasn't funny, but I didn't laugh at everything. Now I struggle with comedies. I think they're just okay. I think their rewatchability is hard because once you know all the jokes, it's hard to enjoy it the way you did the first time. So rewatchability is important to me. Um, but honestly, a lot of the jokes they didn't land for me, and it's for stupid reasons. I go watch entertainment to escape the real world. So when the real world seeps into my entertainment, I get a little grumpy. So I'll give you an example. There's a scene where there's a character who's trying to do something and it doesn't work, and they're like, "Oh no, uh, okay, no problem. I'll go to plan B." Meaning that plan A was not working. So now let's go to plan B. And this show has two narrators and they constantly interject and interrupt the show. So they interrupt right there and they look dead at audience and they're like, "Well, some people are trying to stop plan B." Meaning plan B, you know, for women's health. And look, I'm not saying they don't have a point, and I'm not even against them. I'm with them on these points. It's just I'm like, no, no, no. I don't come here for politics. My issue with a lot of entertainment is because they have this platform, they're like, well, I got to use it. I got to use it to preach the word. And I'm like, you understand that most of the people who come to this probably already feel the way you feel. So you're just in a vacuum. You're talking to like-minded people, and of course they're going to applaud. And I think this is why shows do this. They're all like, "Look at us. We're talking about important current events here, and we're fighting for the man." And so they say something that they think is clever like that, like, "Ooh, plan B." But some people are trying to stop plan B. And everyone's like, "Yeah, woo!" And they get an applause. I think that's why they do it, because they want the audience to applaud. I'm like, well, of course they're going to applaud. Chances are they already feel the way you do. It's not that you can't do that. That's just not what I'm looking for. I go to theater, to movies, what have you, to escape all this. But entertainment feels the need to talk about it. Okay, fine. They just did it a lot, and I didn't care for it. Whereas there were other moments where people just told a regular joke, and I thought those were very funny. I would tell you one, but I don't want to spoil it. Um, for me, the real reason to see Shuck right now, if you haven't seen it and you are thinking about it, I would go before they announce a major cast change, is to see Alex Newell, who plays Lulu. I was looking up the character name because I can't seem to remember that. We thought, I'm looking for the actual cast list. We knew we were going to come see this show when Caroline, oh, what's her last name? That's what I'm looking for, her last name. Inner Bickler. I'm going to spell it here. She is an original cast member, and she was leaving the show soon. And so we thought, oh, we're gonna see one of her last shows ever. But no, she left a day or two before we saw her. It was announced actually that she's pregnant, and that's why she left the show. So congratulations to Caroline. So at this performance, we saw, where is it? She plays the part of Maisie, Caroline. Maisie's the plucky young girl who goes out. Tracy Elaine Lee, very, very good. Loved her. They all were good. Kevin Calhoun played Peanut. Peanut is your stereotypical redneck type, but lovable like character. The antagonist, and I'm going to use that term very loosely. His name is Gordy. That was played by John Bellman. Maisie has a love interest. His name's Bo, and that was played by Andrew Durant. Oh my God. He has a couple solos that were very, very good. He did a great job. I did like our narrators. Oh, excuse me. In the playbill, they're listed as storytellers. Gray Henson and Ashley Kelly. They were funny. They know how to deliver the lines. I just didn't find everything they said funny. But yeah, the real reason to go is to see Tony Award winning Alex Newell, who I actually remember from the Glee project. I remember um, her, them. I actually don't. Maybe it's listed here. Let me check that out real quick. Da, 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 da. Oh no, it's not listed. Most programs have their pronouns in here. This one does not. And even the description in the playbill is carefully written, so it doesn't have to give pronouns at all. Well, Alex Newell did win Best Featured Actor in a Musical. Totally deserves it. Now, um, the big number that Alex sings has been labeled a showstopper. Now, maybe I was just tired because I saw we could blame once. Maybe because this was my second show, maybe I was tired. Maybe the crowd wasn't feeling it the way that they did back when it was in previews. I wouldn't label it a showstopper. It's a very good song. It's solid, but it to me it didn't make the earth stop. That again, we got to be careful when we describe things. Don't hype it up so much because you might ruin it by building it up too high. Um, so I'm very happy I got to see Alex. Alex was amazing, amazing. I do love the puns. Now, I must admit, part of the reason why I wanted to go, I saw that they were passing out buttons that said "I got shucked." And so when we got there, I went up to the little merch stand and I asked if they had the buttons, and they're like, no. And I was like, oh. But there was two merch carts, and at the other one, they were like, oh, we have stickers. I just really wanted something that said "I got shucked" on Broadway. This is again, whoever's in charge of the advertising of the show, you're earning your money. That's such a good idea. I've never wanted anything so badly. I usually don't care about the merch, but I'm like, I gotta have something that says "I got shucked" because that's just hilarious. Love it, love it, love it, love it. Um, really loved the scenery in this show. I like shows that only have one set and they just like bring tables and chairs on and off or other smaller set pieces in front of it. I love that. The choreography in this show is really, really good. They do really cool things with barrels and just timing everything out. It's very, I mean, all dance is athletic, but you could feel the athleticism in the dancing. So it was also a really good time. I'm sure, I'm trying to remember. I think it's the standard length that most shows are, but it didn't feel long. It moves at a very good pace. Trying to think what else is unique about this show. Um, yeah, the humor is hit or miss. I haven't heard anyone say they didn't like the humor, but I thought it was hit or miss. I think there was some jokes that like Peanut is a character who he doesn't tell one joke when he tells four in a row. And after like they do this shtick where they set him up and because they say what they say, and it gets him going on this path. So he did it one time, and at first you're like, oh, okay. And then a little bit of time goes by, and then they do this thing again, and it sets him off again. And he tells four, they're not the same jokes, but they're the same style. And I was like, oh, this is like his thing. And then he kept doing it. And I'm like, it's a lot. And they're not all funny. I don't know if they're like, we love all of our jokes so much and we can't choose. So we're just going to shove them all in here. This show could use some editing on the jokes that I'm like, they don't all have to be here. They're not all that funny. Um, yeah. So it was fun. But I have to say that after seeing both of these shows, if I could go back in time and not buy the tickets, I think I would, if I'm being honest. I don't hate that I saw them, but you can't see everything. You don't have the money to see absolutely everything. So I do want to be a little bit pickier and make sure that I mean, it's hard to be absolutely sure, but I do want to make sure that I have a good time. So I'm not going to see something just because I see something. Either it's going to be, oh, well, I did that lottery thing, or hey, if I'm patient and go at the right time, you can get discount tickets, something. I might save shows that I'm on the fence about and do those other tips and tricks that people always talk about and see them at a discounted rate just because I'm not sure. Um, so I'm a little tired, but yeah. So it was a long weekend, and even a tiny little channel like mine, where I probably only get like 20 people who watch this thing. I'm going to try to cash in on the whole Barbenheimer idea of we actually called the whole weekend our once a shucked weekend. So that was my once a shucked experience. It's a little exhausting to see shows back to back. I'm just out of practice, like because New York is 4 hours away, and I do have to work, and um, maybe that was the flaw. Maybe we shouldn't have seen them, but I mean, we didn't mean to. It just kind of worked out that way. I don't recommend it unless you're a lot closer to New York, or I don't know. Conditions have to be right. Let's just put it that way. But those are my thoughts on both of these shows. I had fun, and I'm not done yet. I do have some more touring stuff. That's it for New York for just a little bit. We have some things that are coming to us that are touring, so I'm going to check those things out. So this is not the end. I'll see you soon. Bye.